Hi, morning, everyone. Today I have Deonna Chambers here with me on the living room, and we are doing a special theme this season, and we are going to do an author spotlight. Deonna Chambers is an author herself, and the author spotlight is going to feature authors who have um, books that have meant to actually create a change or build do an impact for the readers out there. So it's actually it's going to be a topic centric that's going to create more self-awareness for the readers. And I'll let Deonna Chambers share a little bit about her background and a little bit more about her latest book as well. Hi, Deonna. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. So, I am Deonna Chambers. I grew up in the Midwest, and for most of my life, I have really focused on work, right? Head down, just doing a lot of work. My profession is HR, so I am an HR professional who focuses on talent and diversity and inclusion. And so, really, when I think about my journey to becoming an author, it really happened after I had had my first child. I had a daughter. And, I had largely always been incredibly creative. But after I had my daughter, during that time when I was home for the next like 12 to 20 weeks, it was, I had her in December. And so, like many women around the world, I was largely suffering from postpartum. And I leaned on my ability to be creative, to think through stories. What would I want to tell my daughter? What were some of the things that I would want to capture in a very childlike way to bring alive for her? And so I began to write my really creative ideas down, and I partnered with a friend who was an illustrator, and came about my first book, My Brother's Other Dad, which is all about diversity, and it's about a young boy whose family is blended. It's about a young boy who's the product of a second marriage, and just how even in situations where you may have had a divorce and a second marriage, you can really have a loving situation come of that when you have two parents who are incredibly mature and put their children first, all out of love. And in thinking, if we do the right thing together, we'll raise happy children. And so that was the first book. And then the second one really came about because then my daughter was born, and I was looking at this beautiful little girl and wanting her to see more books in her image. And I was thinking about my history and my heritage and my hair. And so I wrote At Home in the Kitchen. And so At Home in the Kitchen is really a book about heritage. And it's about this young girl named Nia. She's 6 years old. She's growing up in New York City, and she learns all of these old tales from her grandmother about their history and heritage. And one of them is about how her grandparents used to trace their voyages through Africa using maps that were braided into their hair. And so this beautiful, intricate map would be braided, and then locations would be symbolized with beads and beautiful jewels. And so her mother braids her hair, and she goes to school. And as show and tell, she shows her beautiful braid design and shows the children how she would get from school to her house. And along this journey, you get to see all of the things that young Nia encounters as she goes home. And so, for most women, and very specifically, women of color, our hair, our heritage, our the way that our mothers instill beauty regimens is very, very specific. Adding the oils and the jewels and the gems, it's very specific to our cultures. And those are times of bonding for young women of color. Those are times where we spend times with our mothers, our grandmothers, and we learn about ourselves, and we learn about the power of our beauty that's very specific. And so I wanted to write that, and I wanted to write it in my daughter's essence. I wanted the character to look like her, and I wanted to be reminded of my child when I saw this book. And, I've been so pleasantly pleased because she's now 4. And when she sees the book, she thinks it's her. And so I love it.
I think that's really good. I mean, it's not only something that she can relate to. I do like the whole idea of writing the books, right, to talk a little bit more about heritage, because I think with the world and all that, like, sometimes we sometimes parents get so busy that they don't really have time to explain to the children about their heritage, and and it gets lost along the way, the traditions, the customs, like, why do you do this, or all the interesting stories. And for you to have it documented in a book, that's really good. And to make it a little bit more I think easy to read, so that young children who read it, and they can understand, and they can actually know, why things are done in a way, the traditions, and it gets them curious as well to find out a little bit more about their heritage. And also, I also enjoy that you actually wrote it for your daughter, so that she has something to, something to look forward to, something to relate to. I think is it partly because you feel like the children's books these days, right? They don't actually go into such deeper themes.
I think that there's a fear. I think that people have fear that if they go into, issues that may be traditionally negative, that somehow there will be this great stigma on them as a writer. And I think that my approach in writing is, even with children's books, our kids are going to encounter things, positive and negative. And when you think about how things are introduced to children, it's going to be introduced positive or negative, no matter what we do as parents, no matter what we do as a society. I think those entry points are key, and they're very, very important. And so my approach is to take those topics: second marriages, children before marriage, um, I have 2 moms, I have 2 dads, all of these topics where some person will say it's negative or they'll create some type of stigma. How do we show that in a way that continues just to enforce love in all forms, right? At the end of the day, no matter what, how do we infuse doing the right thing, but bringing it back to positivity and love?
Really good, because we see blended families a lot these days, and some of these issues that you address, right? I mean, a lot of times children's book paint a very happy picture. It's always a picture of a child growing up in a very good home, but you don't have all these underlying issues present, but that's very real. And sometimes a child reading a book who comes from a blended family, for example, might think that maybe I am there's something wrong with my family unit, or there's something wrong with me. Why do I have like two parents, or why do I have two mothers? Why am I a product of a single mother? Those kind of things. So it's really good to address this, to show that there's still happiness that can be found in a blended family, and that it's not that the child is really the odd one out. I mean, it's a norm. It's a norm, and this is what's happening right now. So it's really good that you chose this to address in your book.
Thank you so much.
And Deonna, as are you still as a professional, right? How do you balance between your work and even your writing?
You know what? I can't say that it's easy. It's definitely not. Um, I feel like everything is a sacrifice. In my day job, I love what I do. I show up at work every day determined to make dreams happen from a professional standpoint. The work that I do is about developing people, bringing people together within an organization, and ensuring that they have opportunities bigger better than they ever imagined so that they can take care of their families. And I love that. And outside of that, I balance. I balance spending time with my children and my husband and writing these books. But remember, I get a lot of inspiration from my family. And so most of the time when I'm doing things with my kids and, I'm engaging with them and having experiences, I'm jotting down ideas. Many of these books are things that have occurred in my life. These are things that are a part of my very essence. And so it doesn't feel like work when it's who you are. And so I just feel that I'm lucky and blessed enough to be in a situation where I have the day job that's a passion and who I am. And then I also have these at-home components that are also very much who I am. So largely because I love it all, I don't necessarily feel like I'm working. So it's great.
And how would you describe your writing style? Like, do you actually have a plot in mind first, or do you start with like the characters?
Yeah, I definitely have a story in mind. So I will know like very specifically the message. Like what do I want to get across to the audience? What do I want people to feel when they've read this book? And then from there, it's really about just I storyboard it. So I write out the whole story. And then I begin to think about how does it make me feel as I read it? One of the key things about my book is that, when you look at both books, what you'll see is this very simple story. But at the end of the book, you'll find what I call big kid questions, right? And so you have this book with this simple theme. So I'll go back to the first book, My Brother's Other Dad. Again, it tells the story of this young boy and this blended family. Much of the book it is very happy. At the end of the book, the big kid questions go into tell us about your family. It provides an opportunity for teachers or whomever is reading this book with the child to have some dialogue. Tell us, tell us more about your family. Um, who helps you learn about your history? It asks questions like, what do you think about Julian, who is the first husband? And I'll tell you, I've done book readings where I've had kids say, I may ask a question like, um, whoever spends time with a step parent? And I'll hear kids say things like, I don't know either of my parents. I live with a grandma. And then we're able to dive into that. What is it like? Tell me about your grandma. Let me tell you how normal that is. Let me tell you how much time I spent with my grandma. And it really gets kids talking about their reality. And, in some cultures, talking about your life, talking about how you feel is a no-no. Like we don't talk about our business outside of the house. We don't talk about the fact that your father has been in prison your whole life and you've never met him. We don't talk about those things. But not talking about them does not heal the child. And so through these books, there's an ability to have some additional conversation to get a little closer to healing, acceptance, understanding, awareness of situations. So even a small kid can begin to take a few steps towards some type of normalcy, even in regards to just how they feel about their situation. What doesn't help is silence. Silence never helps. And so that's the additional component of both of these books. Though it's a children's book, it can get very deep in the conversation through the questions.
And it's good that you have these questions that open up dialogue actually to speak about it and to address some of those things. And I think it gives the whoever that's doing the dialogue, right, the opportunity to actually kind of shed light into the situation and say that, this is okay, this is, it's okay to talk about this, because I think a lot of times, like what you say, a lot of cultures don't let us talk about such things. And it really affects a child because, the child doesn't know why we're not allowed to talk about this. And maybe is it because it's wrong, and it kind of has an impact on them, an emotional impact on them as they grow up.
Absolutely. And the impact is so profound because anytime you have a child who feels they can't talk about one issue, it trickles into other issues. And so next thing you know, you are missing out on some major things that your kid is going through. And then by the time you wake up, you say, why didn't they tell me? Why didn't they talk to me? And it started way back when they were a kid, when they couldn't talk, right? So it doesn't, it's not like a light switch where it just flips on one day and suddenly we have all this conversation. It either is something that we do as a family and it's something that is acceptable, or it's something that's not. And as parents and teachers and professionals that work with children, we have to make it very normal having dialogue, open conversation, and not being shocked by what we hear, because this is real life, this is reality. And just because they're children doesn't mean they're not getting a dose of the harshest reality. We just don't know as adults if we aren't open enough to receive it.
And Deonna, just share with me, right? Because there's so many children's books out there these days, and they all address a specific theme, right? How is yours? And I've come across a lot of books that are on diversity and all that for the minority groups. So how does your book differ from the rest of them?
So I definitely think key things. My books have multiple themes. So when you look At Home in the Kitchen, it's a book that transcends generations, ancestry, language. Like there are multiple things in this book. It's just multi-dimensional. And it's the same with My Brother's Other Dad. When you look at the characters in my book, when you look at the visuals in my book, it's a book that talks about family, blended family, second marriages, older siblings, and it's also very, very multicultural. So I try to be very thoughtful in the fact that people are we're onions. We have a lot of dimensions to us. And so I'm thoughtful of that. And I think the other piece is the whole big kid questions. The books span a really large age because I'm very thoughtful in thinking about the whole development piece. So from my daughter's age, she's 4, but she's asking questions. Why does my hair look like this, Mom? Why is my hair curly? Mom, why do we have brown skin? Why do we look like this? Why don't I look like my friends? These questions are happening now. And so this is a book that's appropriate for her at 4, but this is a book that's also appropriate for her at 11, because those questions are going to bridge some gaps and provide us with the opportunity to have a deeper conversation.
Really good. I mean, it's good that there's things like you have multiple themes, which actually applies to like different topics that you can actually talk to a child as well. I mean, do you actually if you are on time, I'm sure that you love reading as much.
Mm-hmm. I do.
Yes.
You want to know what I read?
I want to know what impacted you the most. Like, what was the first book that you read that you went like, oh my God, this is such a good book?
Ooh. So my favorite book is The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Soldier. That's my favorite book. And I love that book because it really shows beauty and wealth and all of the things that we all desire, but it shows it from the angle of the consequences that people often have to pay to get those things. And it also shows a family unit that really, really loves each other among very destructive tendencies. And so it's highly entertaining, but I think it's a very real book. It's not a children's book, clearly, but it's a very real book that, I felt depicted many of the situations that I saw growing up. And, whether it was within my own family or within friends' family, they were things that were real. And I think that were also things that really propelled me to um, walk in my faith, and also to be very positive and be very thoughtful as to how I live and how I raise my children, and just, the importance of life.
Nice. That sounds like an interesting book. And is there? I mean, I can understand that being an author, sometimes the journey can be a bit lonely, because there are times you just cook yourself up in a room in a coffee place and just write. So for yourself, when you how do you kind of like take time, take that me time for yourself, like, or what do you do when you need to take a break, or when you feel like I've hit a block now, like, I can't think of anything else to write, like, what do you do during that time?
I don't force it. I think when you think about, creativity, it either flows or it doesn't. When a body of work is forced, I just don't think it's good. And so I think, at least for me, I have to give myself time to truly be thoughtful. And if I feel like I have a bright concept and it's truly a concept, but I can't think through those additional pieces that, like I said, provide feeling to people, then I just kind of let it go for a while. And then I see if it comes back. If it doesn't come back, to be honest, I abort the whole idea and I move on. I think the things that flow to me are the best works that I have. When you think about like my writing style, it's very melodic. So what you'll find in my writing, especially like at home in the kitchen, it almost feels like poetry. When you read it, you read poetry, though it's a children's book.
Nice. Is there a quote that you live by?
I think the one that I probably say the most is, love in all forms must be embraced.
And as we are coming to the end of the section, right, Deonna, is there anything that you would like to share with the viewers out there?
I think that when you think about the last year and a half that we've had, I would just urge people to find their happy place, wherever that is. When you ask me about the balance that I have, I think it's key for people to figure out their passions, monetize those passions, and really attempt to, put themselves in a position where life and health and family are the most important. And so I think that this year has just shown us how, especially with us kind of being cooped up and all together, just how important it is to have that level of focus. And so that's it. Love in all forms must be embraced. If there are people in your life who you love and who love you, embrace that. Hold on to it as tight as you can, because that's really all we have, in the end.
Right. Thanks so much, Deonna, for sharing. I think we'll share your the link to all your books in the social media platforms. And yes, I mean, it'd be great if you can just give us like a little bit of a short snippet that I can actually use as well.
Okay.
You can you can actually do a reading and you can send it to me, which you can actually just put it up on a post as well, on a separate post to go together with the interview.
Absolutely. I surely will. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Deonna. Take care and I wish you all the best.
Alrighty. Have a good one. Bye.
You too. Bye bye.